Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our 13th webinar. Today's webinar will be a continuation of my previous webinar that was titled Proactive Strategies. These proactive strategies, otherwise known as antecedent strategies, are strategies that we proactively implement before a challenging behavior occurs. So in today's webinar, we'll be discussing the strategies that we implement after a challenging behavior, and we call these reactive strategies or consequence-based strategies. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Stephanie Lee, and I'm a board certified behavior analyst, or a BCBA. I've been in the field since 2016, working primarily with children and teens with autism, ADHD, and other learning disabilities. So the strategies that I'll be sharing today, they come directly from my experience with working with families and students in both home and school settings. And I'd love to share these practical tips in ways that are easiest to digest so that you can immediately start utilizing these strategies today. So on our agenda, we'll be discussing the functions of behaviors, the contingencies of ABC, the various reactive strategies, and some additional tools and resources that I'd like to share. So let's get started. Functions of behaviors. I've gone over functions of behaviors during our last webinar, but I wanted to review this again. So functions of behaviors are the why or purpose of behaviors. And it's crucial that we know why these challenging behaviors are occurring. We want to know what's motivating them to engage in those tantrums or aggression so that we can support them effectively by implementing appropriate solutions. So here are the four functions of behaviors. First, we have escape. This is when a behavior occurs to escape or avoid a task or activity. This could be a task, an aversive or non-preferred situation, or even some sort of sensory input that feels overwhelming. Second, we have attention, and this is when a behavior occurs to gain the attention of others. So a child might be shouting or making inappropriate comments or climbing furniture, all because they want someone to notice them. They want attention. Even if the attention is negative, such as verbal reprimand, like stop that or don't do that, or a frown, they still thrive on it. So we want to be mindful of how we respond to these attention-maintained behaviors. Third, we have tangibles. This is when a behavior occurs to gain access to activities, items, or maybe even a specific person. This is pretty straightforward. So child asks for another cookie, parent says no, child cries. Child asks for a new toy, parent says no, child engages in a tantrum. And these are all examples of when a child engages in challenging behaviors for access to tangibles. And fourth, lastly, we have sensory automatic. Some behaviors simply happen because they feel good or meet some kind of internal need for sensory stimulation. So some examples of this can be hand flapping, spinning, pacing back and forth, even nail biting, hair twirling. These are all examples of automatic sensory behaviors. And now that we discussed the functions of behaviors, let's introduce ABC contingencies because they'll all come together. So to further understand these functions of behaviors a little bit better, let's take a closer look at these contingencies. ABC contingencies are like a framework that help us break down an event to see why a behavior occurs and how we can address it effectively. So for example, as a BCBA, I collect what we call ABC data so that I can narrow down the function of a challenging behavior. I want to know why a certain behavior occurs so that I can create a treatment plan to reduce that challenging behavior while teaching other functionally equivalent replacement behaviors. So to break down the ABCs, A stands for antecedent, B stands for behavior, and C stands for consequence. When we look at this closely, we have antecedent referring to what happens before the behavior occurs. So think about the environment or situation leading up to the behavior. What does the environment look like? What happens before the behavior? What are the triggers? B, behavior, refers to literally the behavior itself. So what does the observable action look like? And C, consequence, refers to what happens immediately after the behavior. And keyword here is immediately. So what happens after the behavior? And when we analyze behavior using this ABC framework, we can start identifying patterns and gain more information into why certain behaviors happen. This allows us to develop effective strategies to reduce those undesirable behaviors and to increase the desirable ones with replacement behaviors. So I've broken down some hypothetical scenarios here into this ABC framework. Technically, I've created them so that each scenario reflects a specific function, whether it's sensory or automatic, tangibles, attention, or escape. So the first scenario here, Johnny has dry, itchy skin, which is the antecedent. B, Johnny began to pick on his skin, causing his skin to bleed. And C, parent blocked further skin picking by applying Band-Aid. And from this, I can hypothesize or predict that Johnny's skin picking might be attributed to sensory or automatic functions. And usually, when we see a child or individual engaging in the behavior, even when he or she is alone and no one is around, we can make a pretty good assumption that the behavior is attributed to sensory or automatic function. It's to relieve or gain some sort of sensory stimulation. The second scenario says A, parent turned off TV. B, Johnny cried and asked for more TV. C, parent allowed 30 more minutes of TV. And with this information, I can hypothesize that Johnny might have engaged in crying for access to tangibles, which in this case might be access to more TV. The third scenario says A, parent is on a work call. B, Johnny continued to grab and pull on parent's clothing. C, parent ended work call and reprimanded Johnny. So if I start to see a pattern here where Johnny continues to engage in this grabbing and pulling whenever mom is on a work call, and I see mom ending the work call to reprimand Johnny, I can confidently say that Johnny is engaging in these behaviors for attention because, again, even negative attention is attention. The last scenario says A, parent asked Johnny to clean his room. B, Johnny engaged in a tantrum. And C, parent followed through and helped Johnny by cleaning the room together. So the parent did a really good job here by following through, but with this information, I can predict that Johnny may have engaged in that tantrum to escape from a non-preferred demand, which in this case was cleaning. So now that we talked about the functions of behaviors and the ABC contingencies, let's jump into the different reactive strategies. So what exactly are reactive strategies? These are strategies that are also known as consequence-based strategies. These are strategies that we implement after a challenging behavior occurs to reduce the likelihood of it occurring again. So in other words, when we come across a challenging behavior, we want to make sure that we manage the situation with the appropriate strategies so that we'd see a decrease in future occurrences of the challenging behavior, not an increase. So essentially, we want to replace that challenging behavior with something that is functionally equivalent and more desirable. So something important to also keep in mind is that we need to figure out the function. Remember the 4 functions that we discussed? We need to know the function or purpose so that we apply the appropriate or effective strategies. We want to manage it appropriately. So this strategy, sensory and automatic extinction procedure, is our first one that we'll be discussing. This is a strategy that we want to implement when we have a behavior that is maintained by sensory or automatic function. So that hand flapping or pacing or nail biting that we discussed. So what is it? It's masking or removing the maintaining sensory consequences. So some examples of utilizing this procedure is to use noise canceling headphones to reduce vocal stereotypy, placing bandages over open wound to reduce skin picking, tying hair in a bun or wearing a hat to reduce hair pulling, keeping nails short to reduce nail biting. And some things to consider when we implement this strategy is to rule out medical factors as needed. It is crucial that we do this. We want to make sure that the behavior isn't due to any medical reasons. When in doubt, I highly recommend just go ahead and see a doctor. So for example, if we see a child engaging in headbanging, I'd have a doctor look at the situation first before I start recommending any behavioral strategies. We also want to teach appropriate replacement behavior. So instead of simply blocking or saying stop that, I can teach alternative behaviors. And this is where fidget toys, chewies, or teaching leisure activities can come into place. We also want to consider the level of risk or harm to the individual and others. So, for example, headbanging is a high risk. We want to target the behavior immediately. Vocal stereotypy, I would say it's maybe medium risk because it's not too much of a harm to others. It might be disruptive, but not too much harm. Hand flapping, I'd say it's very low risk. Usually, there's no harm done with just hand flapping itself. We want to consider these things before we create some sort of treatment plan for the child or individual. We also want to enrich the environment, and this is so important too. We want to place items or activities around the environment so that they can easily compete with the automatic behavior. We want to teach as many different types of leisure activities as possible. We also want to consider some protective equipment like sleeves or helmets if they are needed. We want to reduce, again, any risk or harm. We want to be ready at all times to block and redirect to other activities or behaviors. This is where we have them engaged or keeping their hands busy. And lastly, we want to be consistent. Escape extinction procedure, the title gives it away, but this is a strategy that we want to implement if the behavior is maintained by escape. So, what is it? Not allowing escape or termination of a task, demand, or a situation, or following through. So, some examples of this procedure: parent doesn't allow the child to skip homework but offers help and guidance through the completion. Teacher guides the student back to desk to have him complete his work before a break. Parent does not allow the child to have snacks before finishing veggies. Some considerations for this procedure, just to note, some of these considerations are all similar for all the extinction procedures. But with any other procedure, especially extinction procedures, the behavior might temporarily get worse before getting better. And we want to be prepared for this. We call this an extinction burst. We want to teach appropriate replacement behaviors as well. Teaching functional communication response is a way of teaching replacement behavior. So all that, all done, break, those are some kind of functional communication responses that we can teach. We also want to be consistent and make sure that all individuals involved with the child or person are implementing the procedure. We don't want to, for example, have dad allowing snacks before veggies while mom doesn't allow veggies before snacks. We don't want to see that behavior contrast. Attention extinction procedure. This is a strategy for attention maintained behaviors. So, what is it? Withholding attention to the specific behavior or planned ignoring. So, examples: teacher ignores student blurting out inappropriate jokes during a lesson. Child hits and grabs parent to gain attention. Parent blocks and does not respond. Some considerations for this procedure: we want to remember that even negative attention, like frowns or reprimands, are attention. I'd be very mindful about the way we respond. We want to maintain a neutral tone and affect. We don't want to give in. And like any other extinction procedures, again, we want to remember that the behavior might temporarily get worse before getting better. It's also important to teach appropriate replacement behaviors. Like, for example, with the example here where the child is hitting and grabbing for attention, we can teach the child to gain attention appropriately by either tapping or making um, eye contact, or maybe even just calling mom. And lastly, we want to be consistent. Tangible extinction procedure. This strategy is for behaviors maintained by access to tangibles. So, what is it? No longer providing access to the activity or item contingent on the behavior. So, for example, child cries for more screen time. Parent offers other alternative options, but does not allow access to tablet. We want to follow through. Child cries for a new toy at Target. Parent proceeds with other shopping and does not purchase a new toy. Student hits and grabs another peer's toy. Teacher blocks and hands the toy back to the peer. We don't want to give in. Some considerations here: offer other alternative options if possible. One thing about this, though, is that we don't want to negotiate. So we don't want to negotiate after the behavior is fully escalated. Um, we want to kind of do this during the early stages. So if a child is asking for a cookie during the first instance of denying access, I'd provide alternative choices. So oh, we don't have cookies right now, but I have grapes and apples. It's never a good time to start negotiating after the behavior or tantrum has already proceeded for hours and the child is fully escalated. Again, we want to be prepared for any extinction bursts. We want to teach appropriate replacement behaviors, and of course, we want to stay consistent. Differential reinforcement strategy. This is a strategy that we can and should pair with any other extinction procedures. So we should utilize this strategy along with any of the four procedures that we just discussed. So what is it? We're reinforcing desirable behaviors while withholding reinforcement for the undesirable behaviors. So we start seeing that contrast. We want to have the child distinguish the way we respond. So some examples, child whines and cries while pointing to juice. Parent does not respond until child says, "More juice, please." Student yells out, "Me," to gain teacher's attention. Teacher does not respond until the student raises his hand. Parent does not respond to child throwing toys for attention. Parent does not respond until child calls mom. So some considerations here, we want to offer other alternative options if possible. We also want to help the child distinguish the way that we respond. We want to make it as clear as possible, and we want to be consistent. So additional tools and resources. Aside from the materials that I shared today, I'd like to take a moment to introduce some additional tools that are available for you. A little bit about our Village program. We are an incredible resource available to you. We have expert guidance with IEPs. We offer a comprehensive IEP checklist. We have our own very own private community with an entire resource library and on-demand support from educational specialists. Not only that, we have professionals like speech pathologists, occupational therapists, BCBAs like myself, and psychologists that you can book one-to-one meetings with. We also have 12 other webinars aside from this one that you can freely access through our website, and it's there for you. It's free. Check out our website at VillageED.org, and under recorded events, you'll see other webinars just as you see in this page. And we have many other topics that are hopefully relevant to your needs. Another exciting thing about our Village program is that our incredible resource library. We have 3 different categories. The first one are parent resources, where we introduce a variety of different topics. We also provide some recommendations, a lot of information that we're sharing over there. Behavior management and skill acquisition procedure, that second category, is where the parent can act as a teacher. It's kind of like a lesson plan, a step-by-step lesson plan of the different strategies that we can teach, the different domains, and how we can do that. And lastly, we have printable activities that you can download and just print, hand over to your child. We offer a variety of different topics and touch base on a variety of different topics for this one as well. Just wanted to show you a bit more from our resource library here. So some of the materials that I pulled from our library that are relevant to today's topic include these. So we have one on de-escalation tips, transitions, the power of rewards, and some consequence-based strategies, otherwise known as reactive strategies, the ones that we discussed today. So thank you so much for joining today's webinar on reactive strategies. I really hope you found the information helpful and easy to understand. I'd like to encourage you to keep using these strategies and be patient with the process, be consistent. Thank you again for your time today. If you have any other further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out with the contact information here. Thank you and have a great one.